In the farthest corners of the galaxy, on a planet far from Earth, the Vortha, a powerful and advanced alien race, had been watching humanity for centuries. The Vortha were known for their cold, calculated approach to all things, their main goal being control and domination. They had carefully studied the Earth from a distance, but now they needed someone on the ground to observe more closely. For this delicate task, they chose Nyx, one of their most skilled spies. She was trained to blend in, gather intelligence, and report back without ever revealing her true nature. Her mission was clear: study Earth's capabilities, its weaknesses, and its potential as a threat or an asset. She was to remain unseen and unnoticed, tracking every detail of human behavior. To do this, Nyx assumed the guise of a researcher, a simple human role that would allow her to move through society without raising suspicion. Arriving in a bustling metropolis, she began her observations in a quiet, efficient manner. She spent her days watching humans in their everyday lives, observing their patterns, their technology, and the way they interacted with each other. There was something about humanity that intrigued her. From a distance, Earth's people seemed chaotic, unpredictable, and often emotional. Yet there was a raw energy in their movements, a kind of fire that the Vortha didn't quite understand. As days passed, Nyx began to feel an odd fascination with them, particularly with one human, Caleb. He was young, driven, and passionate about his work as a scientist. His focus was on energy research, something that, if perfected, could change the very fabric of human civilization. Nyx had been watching him for weeks now, noticing the way he poured himself into his work with such intensity, almost as if he was racing against time. He was different from the others she had observed, more curious, more determined, more alive. There was a spark in him that she couldn't ignore. At first, Nyx tried to remain distant. She reminded herself that her mission came first. But, with every passing day, she found herself drawn to Caleb's determination, his ability to face challenges with unwavering resolve. It was something she had never seen in any of her own people. The Vortha, despite their advanced technology, lacked this kind of spirit. She watched how Caleb interacted with others, how he showed kindness even to those who didn't deserve it, and how he never gave up, no matter how difficult his circumstances became. She had expected to find humans weak, fragile, and easily broken. Instead, she found them resilient, capable of immense strength in the face of adversity. Nyx couldn't explain the way she felt. The emotions she was experiencing were completely alien to her, something she had never encountered during her years of training. She was a Vortha, trained to keep her emotions in check, to see things from a purely logical perspective. Yet, Caleb's humanity began to stir something inside her. It was a feeling she didn't quite understand, but one she couldn't ignore. She found herself wanting to learn more about him, to understand why he was so different from the others. She even began to help him, subtly influencing his work. When he faced roadblocks in his research, she was there, using her advanced knowledge to guide him without him ever knowing. She watched as he slowly advanced in his project, unaware that the small breakthroughs were thanks to her quiet intervention. But it wasn't just his intelligence or his work ethic that fascinated her. It was the way he approached life itself. Humans, despite their flaws, held a kind of beauty in their imperfections. They didn't have the perfect technology or the perfect solutions, but they always found a way forward. The more Nyx observed, the more she began to question the mission she had been given. Was humanity truly a threat to the Vortha, or was there something more to them? Something worth protecting? Each day she spent on Earth, Nyx's resolve began to falter. She felt a growing pull toward Caleb, a connection she couldn't explain. She had been trained to view humans as nothing more than potential targets, subjects to be studied and, if necessary, conquered. But as she watched Caleb work, as she saw his hope and his ambition, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this world than her people had ever realized. She found herself thinking about him even when she wasn't near him, wondering what his future would look like. It was a dangerous thought for a Vortha spy, one that could destroy everything she had been trained to believe. But it was a thought that grew stronger with each passing day. The more she watched humanity, the more she realized they were far more than just a project. They were a force to be reckoned with. And Caleb, with all his passion and vision, might just be the key to understanding them. Nyx continued to observe Caleb from the shadows, her presence almost invisible as she watched him work tirelessly on his clean energy research. His days were filled with long hours in the lab, sketching out complex formulas, testing new materials, and analyzing data. To Nyx, this human drive for progress was both fascinating and confusing. The humans had such limited resources compared to the Vortha. Yet Caleb's passion and determination seemed boundless. His work, so full of hope, was a stark contrast to the cold, calculated approach Nyx was accustomed to. It was in these moments that she began to realize that, despite her mission, she had been wrong about humanity. They were not weak or inefficient. They were incredibly resourceful, always finding new ways to move forward. Nyx found herself inexplicably drawn to him, and she couldn't understand why. Every time Caleb faced a challenge, she found herself offering subtle help, small, seemingly inconsequential solutions to his problems. A miscalculation in his experiment? A suggestion here or there that pushed his research in the right direction. Her interference was invisible, but it helped him make small breakthroughs that otherwise would have been difficult. She was careful, never revealing herself, always watching from the sidelines. The more she observed, the more she admired Caleb's resilience. He was kind, curious, and relentlessly driven by the hope of making a difference. One day, an unexpected event threw their paths together. Caleb was attending an academic conference to present his research on clean energy, a project that had gained attention worldwide. Nyx, ever the observer, had been watching the event from the sidelines, blending in with the crowd, careful not to draw attention to herself. However, as fate would have it, she found herself standing in the same hallway as Caleb. He was lost in thought, probably thinking about his upcoming presentation, and when he turned a corner, their eyes met. For a moment, Nyx froze, unsure of what to do. She had kept her distance from him for so long, and yet now, in this small, seemingly insignificant encounter, something within her stirred. Without thinking, she smiled and introduced herself. Her voice, smooth and calm, sounded strange to her own ears. Caleb, always polite and approachable, returned the smile. They exchanged a few words about the conference, and as they talked, Nyx found herself surprisingly at ease. Their conversation was brief, but there was an undeniable connection between them. Caleb's warmth, his genuine interest in the world, was magnetic. In that moment, Nyx realized how much she had come to care for him. Yet she couldn't let her guard down. She was an alien spy, and any involvement with him could jeopardize everything. Despite her initial resolve to remain detached, Nyx found herself inexplicably drawn back to Caleb. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths again and again, each encounter seeming more like fate than chance. They talked about everything and nothing at all: science, the future, even their personal hopes and dreams. With each conversation, Nyx's resolve weakened, and she felt herself slipping deeper into a connection she had never intended to form. Caleb's curiosity was infectious. His questions about the world, about life, and about the universe were endless, and Nyx couldn't help but respond with genuine interest. He was different from anyone she had ever met. His humanity, his flaws, his passion, it was all so real. He made her question her mission, question the orders of her people. Slowly, the line between observer and participant began to blur. Nyx's role as a mere watcher became harder to maintain. She wanted to protect him, to help him more than just with his research. In a strange way, she found herself caring about Caleb more than she ever thought possible. She knew the dangers of such emotions. She knew that if her superiors found out, her mission would be compromised, and worse, she could be forced to make an impossible choice. Yet, each time they met, it became harder to separate her duty from her feelings. Caleb's smile, his enthusiasm, his passion for life, it all pulled her in deeper. He was unaware of her true identity, unaware of the danger she posed, but to her, the danger was no longer external. The real threat was the growing affection she felt for him. Every time she looked at him, she was reminded that her loyalty to her mission could destroy the very thing that was making her question everything she thought she knew. Nyx, the cold and calculated observer, had become a participant in something far greater than her mission, a bond she hadn't expected, and one that she wasn't sure how to control. As Nyx continued to spend more time with Caleb, the bond between them deepened, and the emotions she tried so hard to suppress began to overwhelm her. She found herself torn between her duty to the Vortha and her growing affection for the young scientist. However, her superiors on the Vortha ship had begun to notice the change in her behavior. Her reports, once precise and cold, had grown less frequent and more vague. The alien race, so accustomed to maintaining control, could not afford any risks. They demanded regular updates, pressing her to report on every aspect of Caleb's research and humanity's technological progress. Nyx's mind raced as she crafted each report, carefully leaving out details of her increasing involvement with Caleb. She knew she was walking a fine line, but she couldn't bring herself to betray him, especially as he trusted her more and more. Every conversation they shared felt like a thread that tied her closer to him, and to reveal the truth now would destroy everything. Meanwhile, Caleb's research had taken a dangerous turn. The clean energy technology he had been developing, a breakthrough that could solve the world's energy crisis, was now drawing attention from powerful forces. A rival corporation, with its own plans for the future of energy, saw Caleb's project as a threat. They began to sabotage his work, launching covert attacks on his lab and stealing data in an attempt to delay or halt his progress. Caleb, unaware of the true danger, fought back, but the constant setbacks were wearing him down. Nyx watched as the stress began to take its toll on him. His once optimistic attitude faltered, and she could see the worry in his eyes. She longed to help him, to use her alien knowledge to protect him, but doing so would expose her true identity. The thought of Caleb discovering who she really was terrified her, but she knew that if she didn't act soon, he might lose everything. At the same time, Nyx uncovered a terrifying truth within the Vortha hierarchy. The alien race, once believed to be neutral observers, was planning something far more sinister. They were not here simply to study humanity. They saw Earth as a threat, a rising power that could challenge their control over the galaxy. The Vortha, with their advanced technology and superior weapons, had begun preparations for an invasion. Their plan was to subdue humanity before Caleb's energy technology could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Nyx had always been told that the Vortha were simply cautious, carefully monitoring emerging species to avoid potential threats. But now she realized the truth. Humanity had already been marked for destruction. The knowledge sent a chill through her as she realized the full extent of the danger. Earth was not just a pawn in the galaxy, it was a target. Now, Nyx faced an impossible choice. She could remain loyal to the Vortha, following her orders and reporting back to her superiors, or she could betray her own people to protect Caleb and humanity. She knew that if the Vortha succeeded in their invasion, Earth would be forever altered, its people crushed under the weight of alien rule. Caleb's work, his vision of a better world would be erased. But helping him would mean exposing herself, risking everything she had worked for, and possibly condemning her to a fate worse than death among the Vortha. Her mission had always been clear: observe, report, and remain hidden. But now, with the weight of her growing feelings for Caleb and the knowledge of the Vortha's plans, everything had changed. The pressure mounted with each passing day. Nyx couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She had to make a decision. The clock was ticking, and the fate of both worlds rested in her hands. If she continued down the path of loyalty to the Vortha, humanity would be doomed. But if she chose to stand with Caleb, she would be defying everything she had ever known. Her heart ached as she realized that whatever choice she made, it would change everything forever. The hidden war between the Vortha and humanity had already begun, and Nyx was caught in the middle, her future uncertain and her loyalties in question. The weight of secrecy had become unbearable for Nyx. For weeks she had been hiding the truth from Caleb, lying by omission, keeping her true identity a secret. But with every passing day, the lies became harder to live with. The connection between them had grown stronger and her feelings for him deeper. Nyx could no longer keep him in the dark, not when the fate of both their worlds rested on a decision she could no longer delay. One evening, as Caleb sat in his lab, working late into the night, Nyx knew the moment had come. She had to tell him. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the lab, her heart racing as she approached him. Caleb looked up, surprised but smiling as he saw her. She hesitated for just a moment, then spoke, her voice steady but filled with the weight of everything she was about to reveal. "Caleb," she began, "there's something I have to tell you. I'm not human. I'm an alien spy." Caleb blinked, clearly taken aback. His face flickered with disbelief, his mind struggling to process the words. What are you talking about?" he stammered. "An alien? No, you're not. You can't be." Nyx felt a pang of guilt, but she pressed on, knowing she couldn't hide the truth any longer. "I'm from a race called the Vortha. We've been observing Earth for some time now, and I was sent here to gather information." She paused, watching his reaction closely. "I never expected to feel this." Caleb stood still, processing the confession. His mind raced, torn between the shock of her revelation and the growing trust he had in her. He had known Nyx for months now, had come to rely on her advice and her quiet help in his research. But an alien? The very thought seemed impossible. "I don't know if I can believe you," Caleb said, his voice shaking slightly. "How do I know you're not lying? How do I know you haven't been using me from the start?" Nyx understood his hesitation. She had betrayed his trust by withholding the truth for so long. But she also knew that words alone would never convince him. Slowly, she reached into her jacket and produced a small device, an intricate piece of technology that Caleb had never seen before. He watched in stunned silence as Nyx activated the device, causing a soft blue glow to pulse from it. The technology hummed with energy, unlike anything Caleb had ever encountered. "This," Nyx said, her voice steady, "is just one example of the technology my people possess. I've been helping you with your research using tools like this. I couldn't just stand by and watch you struggle." Caleb's eyes widened as he took in the sight. The device was far beyond anything human technology had achieved, its capabilities clear now in front of him. Slowly, the disbelief began to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of the situation. He felt a cold dread settle in his chest. "So, all this time, you've been helping me, but you're working for them?" Nyx nodded, her expression filled with regret. "At first, yes. I was sent here to gather information and report back, but everything changed when I met you. I saw something in you, Caleb, something I never expected. Your hope, your drive, your vision for the future, it changed me. I couldn't just stay silent anymore." Caleb's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. racing between disbelief and acceptance. He wanted to be angry, wanted to shout at her for lying, for deceiving him. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw the truth there. Nyx wasn't the enemy anymore. The real enemy was far worse. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Caleb finally asked, his voice quieter now. "I didn't know what to do," Nyx replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "I didn't know if you would ever trust me again. But now we don't have much time. The Vortha are planning an invasion of Earth, Caleb. They see humanity as a threat. I've been trying to stop them, but I need your help." The weight of her words hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. The Vortha, a powerful alien race, were planning to destroy everything he had worked for, everything humanity had built. He could feel the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just about his research anymore. It was about survival. As the realization set in, Caleb's mind focused. "Then we fight back," he said, his voice hardening with determination. "We stop them. Together." Nyx nodded, relief flooding her at his response. It was a dangerous plan, one that would require them to go up against the Vortha, but it was their only chance. As they began to form a plan to thwart the invasion, Nyx knew that their bond had shifted from something fragile to something unbreakable. Together, they would face the greatest challenge of their lives, fighting not only against the Vortha, but also against the distrust and fear of humanity itself. The path ahead was uncertain, and the dangers were countless, but one thing was clear. Caleb and Nyx had no choice but to stand together, no matter the cost. As the days grew shorter, Caleb and Nyx found themselves at the center of a growing resistance. They knew they couldn't face the impending invasion alone, so they sought out a group of rogue scientists, military strategists, and activists, people who were skeptical of the government's secrecy surrounding the alien threat. These individuals had been watching the signs of a cover-up for years, piecing together fragments of information that the world at large had been too blind to see. The group, wary at first of trusting Nyx, an alien spy, gradually began to accept her, especially after she revealed the truth about the Vortha's infiltration. Key positions in governments, corporations, and military agencies had already been compromised. The Vortha's reach was deeper than anyone had suspected, and it was clear that the stakes were much higher than just stopping an alien invasion. It was about saving Earth from being manipulated and controlled from the inside out. The plan began to take shape. Expose the Vortha's invasion strategy, prevent their takeover, and unite the world in defense. But the timeline was dangerously tight. The Vortha had already begun to mobilize, and the countdown to their attack was rapidly running out. Caleb, despite the overwhelming pressure, threw himself into his work. Armed with his knowledge of advanced alien technology from Nyx, he began to craft a weapon that could shift the balance of power. It was no easy task. Alien technology was vastly different from anything humanity had ever encountered. But Caleb's brilliance and determination were matched only by the urgency of the situation. He worked day and night, constantly tweaking designs and pushing the limits of what was possible. Each new breakthrough felt like a small victory, a spark of hope in an otherwise dark and dangerous time. As the weapon took shape, it became clear that this was humanity's best chance to defend itself. But as they prepared for the final stages of their plan, Nyx found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The path they were on now was irrevocable, and each choice she made seemed to bring her closer to a decision she never wanted to face. She had become a part of this world, a part of Caleb's life, but her loyalty to the Vortha was still a burden she couldn't shake. If they succeeded in stopping the invasion, if they managed to expose the Vortha and send them back into the shadows, Nyx would likely be forced to leave. She couldn't stay on Earth. Her mission would be over, and her true identity would be exposed. There was a chilling possibility that even if they won, she might never see Caleb again. The thought of never hearing his voice, never seeing his smile, felt like a deep ache in her chest, Her duty to her people had always been clear: observe, report, and remain hidden. But now, standing by Caleb's side, her feelings for him had grown beyond what she had ever expected. She was torn between the life she had known and the life she could have with him. As the resistance began to mobilize, Nyx found herself facing an agonizing choice. If the plan succeeded and the Vortha were driven back, there would be no place for her on Earth. The humans would never forgive her for what she had been, for what she had done. She would be forced to return to the Vortha, to a life of isolation and duty, forever cut off from the one person who had made her question everything. But if she stayed, if she chose Caleb and humanity, she would be betraying her own kind, leaving behind the race that had given her everything. Every day, as they worked together to prepare for the battle ahead, Nyx's loyalty to Caleb and to humanity grew stronger. She watched him pour every ounce of his energy into the weapon, saw the hope in his eyes when he spoke of a future where humanity could thrive, free from alien control. His vision of a better world was one she couldn't ignore. And yet, the stakes were higher than ever. The Vortha's invasion was not just a battle for Earth's survival, it was a battle for her soul. In the quiet moments, when Caleb was lost in his work, Nyx found herself standing at the edge of a precipice. The path ahead was uncertain, and the choice she faced was one she never wanted to make. But the time for hesitation was running out. As the final pieces of the plan fell into place, Nyx realized that her decision was no longer just about survival. It was about choosing who she wanted to be. Would she stay true to her mission, or would she risk everything for the chance at a future with Caleb? The answer seemed to lie in the very weapon Caleb was building, a symbol of hope for humanity, and, in a strange way, a symbol of the impossible choices Nyx had to make. The clock was ticking, and the fate of two worlds depended on the decisions they would make in the coming days. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. Tension had been building for weeks, and now it had reached a boiling point. The Vortha, having discovered Nyx's betrayal, unleashed their full-scale assault on Earth. The sky above cities darkened with the shadows of Vortha warships, their engines humming with cold precision. They came not only to conquer, but to crush the resistance that had dared to stand against them. Nyx's heart sank as she watched the Vortha fleet descend, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived. Her people had found out about her alliance with Caleb and humanity, and there would be no mercy. But she no longer cared about their threats. She was with Caleb now, and together they would fight back. As the warships began to deploy their forces across Earth's major cities, Caleb and Nyx took their places at the forefront of the resistance. Their bond, forged in secrecy and tempered by danger, was now undeniable. The two of them had become the symbols of hope for those who still believed in humanity's future. With Caleb's vast knowledge of alien technology and Nyx's intimate understanding of the Vortha's tactics, the pair led the charge in defending Earth. They used every resource at their disposal, human weapons and alien tech alike, to strike back at the invading forces. Caleb's weapon, finally finished after weeks of tireless work, was a game-changer, designed to destabilize the Vortha's command structure and disable their ships. As explosions ripped through the sky and the ground shook with the force of battles fought in the streets, Nyx and Caleb fought side by side, their trust in each other stronger than ever. The resistance forces, though outnumbered and outgunned, gained ground thanks to the insider knowledge Nyx provided. The Vortha's invasion plans were gradually crippled, their warships falling one by one as Caleb's weapon systems decimated their defenses. It was a brutal battle, and with each victory came a heavy price. Earth's cities were ravaged, and the cost of each victory weighed heavily on the survivors. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, and the toll on both the human population and the resistance was heartbreaking. Nyx watched helplessly as the destruction around her mirrored the anguish in her own heart. The battle, no matter how hard they fought, was tearing the world apart. Every time she glanced at Caleb, she saw the same fear in his eyes. The fear that this might be their last stand, the fear that they might lose everything. Despite the chaos, they pressed on, driven by the belief that victory was within reach. But just as the tide seemed to be turning in their favor, the Vortha unleashed their final weapon, an unstoppable fleet of reinforcements. The situation grew dire. The resistance, though weakened, fought bravely, but it was clear that this battle was far from over. Nyx could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her with every passing moment. If they succeeded in stopping the Vortha, if they could somehow hold their ground long enough, Earth would be safe. But for how long? The Vortha would never give up so easily, and as much as she wanted to stay and fight for Caleb, for the world, they were trying to save. There was a terrible truth she had been avoiding. The Vortha's warships, now retreating to regroup, would soon return, and when they did, the world would face an even greater threat. Nyx's knowledge was the key to final victory, but her betrayal would not go unpunished. The Vortha, in their wrath, would surely demand a reckoning. They would stop at nothing to bring her back. And even though her heart ached at the thought of leaving Caleb, of abandoning the life she had started to build with him, she knew the painful truth. If Earth was to have any hope of surviving the Vortha's wrath in the long term, she might have to return to her own people. As the battle raged on, the thought of leaving Caleb, of never seeing him again, nearly shattered her. She had already lost so much in the name of duty, but this was different. Caleb had become more than just a partner in the fight. He had become her reason to hope, her reason to fight for a future that wasn't defined by war. She could feel the pull of that future with him, the desire to stand by his side, to protect him. But the Vortha would never stop hunting her. If she didn't go back to them, they would come for him. And what would be left of their love, their bond, if she caused him more pain? As the battle entered its most critical phase, Nyx found herself at a crossroads, one that would decide the fate of not just Earth, but her own heart. She had to make a choice. Stay with Caleb, fight for the world, and face the wrath of the Vortha, or return to her people and betray everything she had come to believe in for the sake of her species. The weight of that decision pressed down on her, the cost of victory higher than she had ever imagined. Whatever path she chose, everything would change. The dust of battle had barely settled when Nyx and Caleb stood together amidst the ruins of what had once been thriving cities. The ground around them was scarred, and the air still hummed with the remnants of destruction. Despite their victory over the Vortha, the cost had been tremendous. The streets were silent, save for the echoes of the countless lives lost in the fight to protect Earth. In the wake of their triumph, Caleb and Nyx had become symbols of hope, revered as heroes who had defied the odds and led humanity to a fleeting, but hard-earned victory. But the relief was tempered by the heavy truth that the war was far from over. The Vortha had been repelled, their invasion thwarted, at least for now. But their empire was vast, and their hunger for conquest was not easily sated. The Vortha would return. Nyx had known this from the start. The Vortha would never forget her betrayal, and with their pride wounded, they would regroup, plan, and eventually strike again. But even with this knowledge looming over them, the survivors of Earth had no choice but to push forward. In the aftermath of the battle, the human race had been forced to face the stark reality of their new existence. They had been forced into a position they were unprepared for, to defend themselves against an alien threat. The government, the military, and the resistance had to work together to rebuild not just their cities, but their entire way of life. And at the center of this, Nyx stood, not as an outsider, but as a crucial ally in their fight for survival. Her knowledge of the Vortha, its technology, its strategies, its weaknesses, was invaluable. But it came at a price. Many humans still viewed her with suspicion, even fear. After all, she had once been their enemy. The weight of her betrayal could never be erased, but as time went on, some began to see her as more than just a former spy. They saw her as a bridge between two worlds, someone who had chosen to stand with them when it mattered most. Still, the divisions ran deep, and the road to uniting humanity in preparation for the Vortha's return would be long and difficult. But for the first time in history, Earth had a fighting chance. Together, humans, led by Caleb and Nyx, would form an alliance of their own, a united front against the looming threat that could destroy everything they held dear. Nyx often found herself looking at Caleb, the man who had changed her world forever. In the chaos of war, their bond had grown stronger, and despite the impossible circumstances, they had found something worth fighting for. Together, they had rewritten the story of their respective species, defying the expectations of both humans and Vortha alike. Yet, even as they stood side by side, looking out at the horizon, Nyx couldn't shake the uncertainty of the future. The stars above, once a source of awe and mystery, now seemed like a distant reminder of the vastness of the universe and the challenges ahead. Though the Vortha had been forced to retreat for now, Nyx knew it was only a matter of time before they regrouped and tried again. Earth's defenses were stronger than ever, but the Vortha were relentless, and their empire was vast. But as she stood next to Caleb, with his hand resting gently on hers, there was a flicker of hope. The future was uncertain, and their love was fragile in the face of the coming storm, but they had done the impossible. They had changed the course of history, and together, they had created a new dawn for both of their worlds. The question of what would happen next still hung in the air. Would humanity continue to rise, or would it be crushed by the forces that sought to dominate the galaxy? The path ahead was unclear, and dangers loomed on the horizon. But for the first time, Earth wasn't alone in the universe. And that, for now, was enough. As they stood there, side by side, the uncertainty of the future seemed less daunting. For once, humanity had hope, a hope that was born not from the strength of weapons or technology, but from the courage of individuals who dared to stand together in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle was far from over, but for Nyx and Caleb, there was one undeniable truth. They had forged something stronger than any enemy, something that could never be taken away. Love, courage, and a future worth fighting for. The sun was setting, but it was the dawn of something new. Something greater than either of them could have imagined. Together, they had made a stand, and together, they would face whatever came next.